In the small village of Kumo, nestled between tall baobab trees and flowing rivers, lived a man named Tunde. He was a brave hunter, skilled in tracking game through the dense forest that surrounded the village. He was also a kind man, always ready to lend a hand to his neighbors. Tunde was loved and respected by everyone, but there was one thing that brought him great sorrow. Despite being married to Esther, a woman as gentle as the morning breeze, they had no children. Esther was known throughout Kumo for her kindness. She had a warm smile for everyone and a gentle touch that soothed the aches and pains of life. But inside, she carried a heavy burden. She longed to be a mother, to hear the sweet sound of a child calling her mama. But as the years passed, her arms remained empty, and her heart grew heavy with sadness. The villagers often spoke in hushed tones about Esther's childlessness. Some pitied her, while others whispered that she might be cursed. Esther felt their stares and heard their whispers, and each word was like a thorn in her heart. Tunde did his best to comfort her, telling her that their love was enough and that children would come when the spirits willed it. But deep down, he too was troubled. He wanted nothing more than to see his wife happy, to watch her cradle a baby in her arms. One day, after many years of waiting and hoping, the village elders called Tunde to a meeting. These elders were wise men and women who had seen many seasons come and go. They had the respect of the entire village, and their advice was often sought in times of trouble. Tunde, said the oldest of the elders, a man named Ode, "You are a good man, and the village holds you in high regard. But it is time for you to consider taking another wife, one who can bear you children." Tunde's heart sank. He knew this suggestion was coming, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. He loved Esther deeply and couldn't bear the thought of hurting her. But he also understood the importance of having children. In their village, children were seen as a blessing, the continuation of a family's line, and a source of joy. Ode continued, "This is not about replacing Esther. She will always have a special place in your heart and in your home. But the village needs its families to be strong, and you need an heir to carry on your name." Tunde nodded slowly, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. "I will think about it," he said, his voice quiet. When Tunde returned home, Esther could see the worry in his eyes. She knew what the elders had said even before he spoke. She had been expecting this day, though it didn't make it any less painful. That night, as they lay under the thatched roof of their hut, Esther spoke first. "If it is what you must do, Tunde, then I will accept it," she said, her voice trembling. "I want you to be happy, and I want our home to be filled with the laughter of children. Even if they are not mine." Tunde took her hand in his and kissed it gently. "Esther, you are my heart. No one can ever take your place. But I cannot ignore the advice of the elders. This decision is not just about us, it is about our future, the future of our family." And so, with a heavy heart, Tunde agreed to take a second wife. He searched for a woman who would be kind and loving, someone who would respect Esther and bring joy to their home. It was not long before he found Chichi, a young woman known for her beauty and gentle nature. Chichi was from a neighboring village, and when she came to Kumo, she was welcomed with open arms. Chichi was everything Tunde had hoped for. She was kind to Esther, always treating her with respect and care. Chichi understood that this was a delicate situation and did her best to make Esther feel comfortable. She never tried to take Esther's place and instead became like a younger sister to her. Tunde was relieved to see that there was no hostility between his two wives. In fact, they seemed to get along well, sharing the household chores and spending time together. The villagers watched with approval, glad to see that peace had settled in Tunde's home. It wasn't long before Chichi became pregnant. The news spread through the village like wildfire, and the people rejoiced. The women of the village visited Chichi, bringing gifts and offering advice. Esther, though she smiled and participated in the celebrations, felt a pang of sadness in her heart. She had always dreamed of this moment for herself, but now it was Chichi who was experiencing it. As Chichi's belly grew, so did the excitement in the village. Finally, the day came when Chichi went into labor. The village women gathered around, singing and praying for a safe delivery. After hours of labor, Chi-Chi gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Tund was overjoyed and named the baby Ao, which means joy. Ao was a beautiful child with bright eyes and a happy disposition. Tund was filled with pride as he held his son for the first time. He knew that Ao would grow up to be a strong and wise man, just like his father. But as Tund held his son, he couldn't help but glance at Esther. She was smiling, but he could see the pain in her eyes. She loved Ao, that much was clear. She cradled him gently, whispered sweet words to him, and took care of him as if he were her own. But Tund knew that her heart ached with the knowledge that this child was not hers. A few years later, Chi-Chi gave birth to a second child, a beautiful baby girl named Ife, meaning love. The household was now full of life and laughter. Ao and Ife brought so much joy to Tund's heart. He loved to watch them play, their laughter filling the air like music. Esther continued to be a loving presence in the children's lives, but the emptiness in her heart grew with each passing day. She adored Ao and Ife, but they were a constant reminder of what she could not have. She prayed to the spirits every night, asking them for the blessing of a child of her own. As the years passed, Esther continued to care for Ao and Ife, pouring all of her love into them. But deep down, she felt more alone than ever. She still yearned for a child of her own, and the emptiness she felt seemed to grow with each passing day. Then, one day, something miraculous happened. Esther began to feel strange, different. She had been feeling tired and nauseous for several days, and she finally decided to visit the village healer, Nana. Nana was an old woman with sharp eyes and a kind heart. She had helped bring many children into the world and was known for her wisdom. After examining Esther, Nana's eyes widened in surprise. "Esther, my child, you are with child," she exclaimed. Esther couldn't believe what she was hearing. After all these years, she was finally pregnant. Tears of joy filled her eyes as she thanked Nana and hurried home to tell Tund the news. When Tund heard that Esther was pregnant, he was overjoyed. He had never given up hope that they would have a child together, but he had resigned himself to the possibility that it might never happen. Now, his heart was filled with joy and excitement. He couldn't wait to meet the child that he and Esther had prayed for so long. The news of Esther's pregnancy spread quickly through the village. The people of Kumo were amazed and overjoyed. They saw Esther's pregnancy as a blessing from the spirits, a sign that their prayers had been answered. But along with the joy, there was also concern. Esther was older now, and everyone knew that childbirth could be dangerous for a woman of her age. Tund was worried too, but he did his best to stay positive for Esther's sake. He made sure she was well taken care of, that she ate good food and got plenty of rest. Chi-Chi also helped, doing everything she could to make sure Esther was comfortable and healthy. As the months passed, Esther's belly grew round, and she felt the baby moving inside her. She spoke to her child, telling stories and singing songs. She couldn't wait to hold her baby in her arms, to finally be a mother. But as the day of the birth approached, the villagers' excitement turned to fear. The elders performed rituals and offered sacrifices to the spirits, asking for a safe delivery. The women of the village gathered around Esther, praying and singing songs of comfort. But despite their efforts, Esther's labor was long and difficult. After many hours, the village was filled with the sound of a baby's cry. Esther had given birth to a beautiful baby girl, whom they named Ugochi, but as the villagers gathered around to welcome the new life, they realized that something was wrong. Esther had grown very weak, and her breathing was shallow. Despite the best efforts of the village healer, Esther passed away that night, leaving behind her newborn daughter. The village was plunged into mourning. Tund was devastated. He had lost the love of his life just as they had finally achieved their dream of having a child together. But amidst his grief, Tund found comfort in his daughter, Ugochi. She was the last gift Esther had given him, and he vowed to take care of her with all the love in his heart. Momokemi, Tund's mother, moved in to help raise Ugochi. She was a wise and loving woman who had always had a special bond with Esther. She saw Ugochi as a precious gift and poured all of her love into the child. As Ugochi grew, she became a source of light and joy in Tund's home. She had her mother's gentle nature and her father's bright eyes. Everyone in the village adored her, and she was never far from the side of her older siblings, Ao and Ife. The three children played together in the fields, their laughter echoing through the village. Tunde, though still grieving for Esther, found solace in his children. He loved to watch them grow and learn, their curiosity and joy bringing new life to his heart. Momokemi, too, found comfort in Ugochi, seeing in her the continuation of Esther's spirit. But as Ugochi grew older, a shadow began to creep into the household. Tunde noticed that Chichi, who had always been so kind and loving, seemed to grow distant. She still cared for Ugochi, but there was a coldness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Tunde dismissed it at first, thinking that perhaps Chichi was just tired or overwhelmed by the demands of raising three children. Then, one day, when Ugochi was about 5 years old, something terrible happened. The village was preparing for a big celebration, a festival to thank the spirits for a bountiful harvest. There was excitement in the air as everyone prepared for the festivities. The children were especially excited, running around in their new clothes, their faces bright with joy. But as the night wore on, Ugochi suddenly fell ill. She was taken to bed, and at first, everyone thought she was just exhausted from all the excitement. But when Momokemi went to check on her, she found Ugochi cold and lifeless. The news spread through the village like wildfire. The celebration came to an abrupt end, and the joyous laughter turned into cries of grief. Tunde was devastated. He couldn't believe that his precious Ugochi was gone. It was as if a part of Esther had been taken from him all over again. The village elders were called to investigate what had happened. They performed rituals and asked the spirits for answers. It wasn't long before whispers of foul play began to circulate through the village. The spirits had revealed that Ugochi's death was not natural. She had been poisoned. The village was shocked. Who would do such a thing? As the whispers spread, suspicion began to fall on Chichi. Some villagers began to believe that Chichi had been jealous of Ugochi, that she had resented the love Tunde had for the child of his first wife. The more they talked, the more convinced they became that Chichi was responsible for Ugochi's death. Tunde was torn. He didn't want to believe that Chichi, the woman he had trusted and cared for, could be capable of such a terrible act. But the evidence was piling up, and the villagers were growing restless. Chichi, for her part, was heartbroken by the accusations. She pleaded with Tunde, swearing that she had nothing to do with Ugochi's death. "I loved Ugochi as my own," Chichi cried. "I would never harm her. Please, Tunde, you must believe me." But Tunde was conflicted. He didn't know what to believe. The spirits had spoken, and the villagers were demanding justice. But in his heart, Tunde couldn't bring himself to condemn Chichi without proof. As the days passed, the tension in the village grew. The elders continued their investigations, but they found no solid evidence to prove Chichi's guilt or innocence. The villagers, however, were becoming more and more convinced that Chichi was responsible. Some even began to talk of banishing her from the village. In the midst of all this turmoil, Momokemi remained silent. She watched as the village turned against Chichi, her heart heavy with a secret she could not share. For Momokemi knew something that no one else did, something that had haunted her since the night Ugochi died. In the spirit world, Esther's soul was restless. She had watched over her daughter from the moment she was born, protecting her from harm. But now, Ugochi was gone, and Esther's heart was filled with sorrow. She knew that her daughter's death was not natural, and she could feel the pain and confusion in Tunde's heart. Esther pleaded with the Great Spirit, asking to be allowed to return to the world of the living, even if only for a short time. She needed to find out the truth and bring justice to her daughter's death. The Great Spirit, moved by Esther's plea, agreed to let her return. Esther's spirit descended into the village, unseen and unheard by the living. She first went to Chichi, hoping to find some clue that would prove her innocence or guilt. But all she found was a woman in deep sorrow, crying for the loss of a child she loved. Chichi's grief was genuine, and Esther knew in her heart that Chichi was not responsible for Ugochi's death. Esther then went to the village elders, listening to their discussions. They were confused and couldn't find any evidence against Chi-Chi, but the suspicions lingered. Esther grew more desperate, knowing that her time in the living world was running out. One night, as Esther's spirit wandered through the village, she overheard a conversation between Momakemi and an old woman named Aya, who was known for her knowledge of ancient secrets. What Esther heard shocked her to the core. "I did what I had to do, Aya," Momakemi confessed, her voice trembling with guilt. "Esther suffered so much in her life, and I couldn't bear to see her child suffer the same fate. The spirits told me Ugochi would live a life of pain, just like her mother. I thought I was saving her from a terrible future." Aya nodded solemnly. "You acted out of love, but your actions have caused great pain. The village is suffering because of what you've done." Esther's heart broke as she realized that it was Momakemi who had taken Ugochi's life, thinking she was saving her from future suffering. Esther's spirit was filled with sorrow for her mother-in-law, but also with a fierce need for justice. She knew that the truth had to be revealed, no matter how painful it was. Esther returned to the Great Spirit and told what she had discovered. The Great Spirit, seeing the pain in Esther's heart, decided to help her one last time. Esther was allowed to visit Tunde in his dreams, to reveal the truth to him. That night, Tunde had a dream in which Esther appeared before him. She looked as beautiful and loving as he remembered. With tears in her eyes, she told Tunde everything that had happened. Tunde awoke from the dream, his heart heavy with grief but also with a sense of clarity. The next morning, Tunde called a meeting with the village elders and the villagers. He shared the dream with them and revealed the truth about Ugochi's death. The villagers were shocked, and many of them wept, realizing that they had wrongfully accused Chi-Chi. Momakemi, filled with guilt and sorrow, confessed to what she had done. She explained that she had acted out of love, believing she was saving Ugochi from a life of pain. The villagers were angry, but they also pitied Momakemi, knowing that her love had led her to make a terrible mistake. The revelation of the truth brought both sorrow and relief to the village. The people of Kumo were deeply saddened by the loss of Ugochi and the pain that had been caused by the wrongful accusations against Chi-Chi. But they were also relieved to know the truth and to have a path forward for healing. The village elders decided that a special ceremony would be held to honor Ugochi's spirit and to ask for forgiveness from the spirits for the wrongs that had been done. The ceremony would also be an opportunity for the village to come together and begin the process of healing. On the day of the ceremony, the entire village gathered at the sacred grove, a place where the spirits were believed to dwell. The elders led the people in prayers and songs, calling upon the spirits to forgive them and to bless the village once more. Momakemi, who had been consumed with guilt since Ugochi's death, was at the center of the ceremony. She knelt before the elders, tears streaming down her face, as she confessed her actions to the spirits. She begged for their forgiveness and vowed to dedicate the rest of her life to helping others in the village, especially the children. The elders, after consulting with the spirits, announced that Momakemi's plea had been heard and that she had been forgiven. But they also reminded her that forgiveness did not erase the consequences of her actions. Momakemi would have to live with the knowledge of what she had done, and she would have to work hard to make amends. As the ceremony continued, the people of Kumo joined together in a dance of unity and healing. They sang songs of forgiveness and renewal, and they promised to support one another as they moved forward from this tragedy. Tunde, though still grieving for the loss of Ugochi and Esther, found some comfort in the ceremony. He knew that the spirits had accepted their pleas and that Ugochi's spirit was now at peace. He also knew that Esther, watching over them from the spirit world, would be proud of how the village had come together in the face of such a terrible loss. Chi-Chi, who had been wrongfully accused, was embraced by the villagers. They apologized for their suspicions and promised to stand by her. Chi-Chi, though still hurt by what had happened, forgave them and promised to help the village heal. As the ceremony drew to a close, Tunde stood with his children, Ao and Ife, and looked out over the village. He knew that their journey of healing was just beginning, but he also knew that they would face it together, as a family and as a community. And so, the village of Kumo began to heal. The memory of Ugochi and Esther was honored, and their spirits were believed to watch over the village, guiding them towards a future filled with love, unity, and hope.